Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about a patent that people are debating if it's about the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake or not, and if it is suggestive of some new mechanics that we'll see involved with the Ocarina of Time remake. And so we're going to be taking a closer look at this patent, seeing what it means, seeing what it's actually about, and considering other things we've heard and seen about patents and what it might be suggesting about the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And I'll point out that one of the big pieces of evidence to give us confidence that the Ocarina of Time remake was indeed happening before Nintendo announced it, before there were reports by others, when it was really mostly a theory with a little bit of rumor, was from a patent that seemed to be very clearly based off the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And so what's going on here exactly? Are we learning more about this game that Nintendo's been very quiet about? Maybe. And so that's what we're going to be diving into today. Now, if you find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed already, I would very much appreciate your subscription. So credit to Mike Odyssey for pointing out this patent to the world and sharing what it's all about. So here is some imagery on it. We can see that there's like a camera pointed at the character from a viewpoint, and then we can see like just a few different angles of it. But then we look over here and we see that there is an option to pull up the game screen with the character still actually on the screen, and you can see a camera, an album, a memorandum, but then also you can have like a normal gameplay mode where you see the game in third person, but close behind the shoulder, and then also a game screen mode where it's a shooting mode in first person. And this patent has the date of August 4th, 2026. And so you might be left to think, okay, is this somehow related to giving us more camera options and menu options in the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake? Possibly. I do wonder why Mike is automatically assuming this has to be for the Ocarina of Time remake. I do not know why he's assuming it's about that. We know it's a Nintendo patent, but there's nothing in here that clearly states it's for Ocarina of Time or is strongly suggestive of that, at least from what I've seen so far. However, when we scroll through, we see that Nashudo responds to this tweet and says, Mike, that patent is from the video game Another Code. And when you take a look at this image here, it matches that patent very well. There is a camera option, an album option, a messages option. The character is in the middle of the screen like this with the menu in front of them. It's very similar what is being shown here to the patent. Very, very similar. So I am left to think, at least at first, that yeah, this patent was just for Another Code. But here's a few things to consider. One, Another Code came out 2 years ago. This is a recent patent that just came out August 4th. So what's going on with that? However, there was a prior publication date from 2024, so there's something to consider there, but why is there a new version of it? That I'm not totally sure on. But scrolling through, Mike responds and says, it's for Zelda, winky face emoji, and here he continues, once Ocarina of Time comes out and the menu UI is revealed, then we will see. If I am wrong, then I will happily admit it. No one is paying me anything for an opinion, so I stay put until then. So Mike Odyssey is saying here that it is for Zelda, that it is for Ocarina of Time. How does he know that? Maybe that's just his opinion, he feels strongly about it. Even when something like this is shown, he doesn't back away from it. It may just be for Another Code, but when I think about how the fact that it was recently we got this update to the patent this month, it just came out, Another Code came out 2 years ago, why is it relevant now? Couple things to consider here. Just because a patent filed by Nintendo clearly had to do with one game does not mean it can't also be relevant for another. And I think some people miss this. The point of a patent is for a party to secure the legal rights over it to protect their invention from being used by others. So if Nintendo's already secured the technology or the invention that was used for Another Code, and then they're updating it 2 years later for some reason, it might actually be suggestive that they want to continue to use this technology, perhaps updating it in some way for another game that's coming out in the not-so-distant future. Securing the right to an invention doesn't mean you can't use that invention in more than one game. If anything, it's for that point, so you can continue to use this invention moving forward. So yes, possibly this is just having to do with the Another Code series. But given that Another Code isn't really happening all too often, and this came out again 2 years later, and that Mike Odyssey is suggesting that it is for Zelda for some reason that he's not clarifying on, I think it's absolutely worthy of conversation, especially because Mike Odyssey in the past has also pointed out another patent that I've brought up a lot on this channel, and this is one of the big images from it, where we see a character exploring a mansion of sorts, or some sort of old-like building that has portraits, and there is a fairy-like cursor on the screen. What does that seem to describe? It seems to describe an environment like the Forest Temple, an old mansion castle-like area, as we've seen from the patents, including this image here, where there are portraits. We have the post-history portraits all throughout the Forest Temple, and then we have Navi that navigates the screen, and here we see this kind of similar interaction here. And when this came out, the thought was, oh, is this describing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time? This was before Ocarina of Time was confirmed. This is before the wide reports. Now, it's still possible that maybe it's just a coincidence, and I remember some people even arguing that this was also for another code. But why are we continually getting different patents over the years for an already released remake of a niche Nintendo DS game? Maybe because we're not. Maybe it's just technology that Nintendo is going to be using in more than just one game. And some of this technology we will see used in the Ocarina of Time remake. Sticking with this patent here, and what it seems to be sort of showing off something like a Forest Temple-like environment for Ocarina of Time, when we initially talked about this patent came out alongside other patents that were very obviously updated patents for Tears of the Kingdom years after it came out. They all came out alongside of each other. They were a series of Zelda-related patents. And you might also wonder, why would they be continually updating patents about Tears of the Kingdom? Maybe because Nintendo wants to secure their legal right because they might use it again. Perhaps in the case of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, if this is the case, again, if, then these different patents, these different technologies, maybe Nintendo's actually using them in the Ocarina of Time remake. It would be suggestive that they are playing around with camera controls, with navigating the UI, with how Navi works with the environment, a modern way of moving about and looking at the game, which would make a lot of sense for an ambitious remake as what we've seen so far with the initial teaser. So assuming Mike Odyssey's confidence in these patents having to do with Ocarina of Time are fully legitimate here, what does this mean for the game? When we look at the shooting mode here, it suggests that we can seamlessly transition over into looking at things in first person, but also obviously you have the typical third person mode. But then also, with the menu navigation, we might even see Link as we are actually scrolling through the menu as we see here. And while this does look a lot like what we saw in another code, it actually seems somewhat similar to how Nintendo handled Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom 2, how you had these moments where you would kind of have these scroll wheels for picking your different items and such. But also, I remember Ocarina of Time, you go back to that menu, it was these different images, these different tiles that were sliding left to right. The only difference here is that this is showing the character in front of the menu there. And I think this is actually really interesting to consider, because in Ocarina of Time, the original release, going back to the menu, swapping out items, from more than just one page by the way, was kind of slow. In this modern era, doing that isn't going to work so well. Now, in Ocarina of Time 3D, they allowed you to use the touchscreen to be able to quickly map items right there on the go in real time, but the issue with that is that the 3DS had a second screen. The Switch 2 does not. So that option will not work either. Now, we consider modern Zelda games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, for a lot of your items, you could summon up a scroll wheel to pick through them right there in the moment, and this could be kind of combining those menu elements. And the idea here might be to kind of allow these things to happen in real time, so there's not that much separation from the actual gameplay and menu navigation here, somewhat similar to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but on a bigger scale where we can interact with more of the menu options. Even if there's no connection between this patent and Ocarina of Time, this is an issue that Nintendo does need to address, how they are going to handle menu navigation for the modern era. The prior iterations of Ocarina of Time will not work. And the way Ocarina of Time was designed, I do think there's going to be some significant shifts here, but it doesn't entirely match up to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom either. So they do need to figure something out different here. Something else I've considered is what they did with Skyward Sword, how they had kind of like a scroll wheel, which I feel like was essentially just modernized further with what we saw in Breath and Tears. So I definitely think there could be something to this patent. Reminder, while the patent may have imagery that looks mostly like another code, the fact that Nintendo is still updating this, as in just 2 days ago, suggests that they want to continue to secure it for perhaps something that's coming out in the not so distant future, like an Ocarina of Time remake. And this kind of tech could be useful for a game like that. It could be a more elegant solution to the menu navigation problem. And when we go back to that other patent with Navi and the Forest Temple and the portraits, that could have to do with perhaps giving Navi more of a role in the game, or adapting the usage of Navi to redesigned environments in Ocarina of Time in conjunction with the camera and the character, which I do think makes a lot of sense. I am expecting some significant redesigns here, as we've already seen with the Deku Tree and Link himself. And so I do think this is going to apply to the environments too. Does that mean they're going to be vastly different structurally? That part hasn't been confirmed yet, but I do think we're going to be looking at least some subtle changes here, and so that probably is going to require some shifts and adjustments to how the camera works, how Navi works, how the menus work. All that makes sense to be updated on for this remake or this rebirth of Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo Switch 2. But those are my thoughts on the matter. What do you all think? Do you think there are something to these patents? Do you think they do hint at something for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time? Or is Nintendo just continually to update patents even for games that came out a couple years ago that are no longer really relevant at all? Tell me in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.